One of my students recently asked me how I use my colour shapers. He had had a go and he was not having much success. So I said I would do a video for him. So these are my colour shapers. I've only got 3, but I use them a lot, and you can get really great effects with them. Come on over to my table and I'll show you how I use these. Okay, so here we have Big Daddy Shaper in the middle, Mummy Shaper to the left, and Little Baby Shaper on the right. And these are the 3 that I'm going to be using. I'm just going to use a scrap bit of paper because there's already some marks and some colours to get going with. And really, the way to use the colour shaper, it's all about the pressure and the angle. You'll see that when I put the shaper on that sort of angle, flat angle, the paint goes on more thickly. When I use the blade, I'm actually using it like a squeegee, and the paint goes on in a sort of a transparent layer, and it's just alternating and varying the pressure and the angle that gives you the different marks that you can see in here. And when you overlap those layers, you get some lovely sort of depth and transparency happening. Now I'm putting light over, and you can see that I'm changing the angle so that the paint goes on thicker. See how I'm flattening it out, and now I'm just using the blade. So where I use the blade, it's like a squeegee, and the paint goes on really thinly in a thin film. And when I flatten the angle, I'm using it a bit like a palette knife, I guess, and the paint goes on thicker, giving you those different effects. Okay, what else can you do? You can sprinkle water on the paint, and then you can scrape the wet water across and it lifts off the paint. That's fun. And you can see that I'm using the edge of the blade again, so I'm using it like a squeegee, and that's the sort of effects that you get. It's just building up these lovely effects. I love the sort of accidental, unintentional mark making effects that you get with a colour shaper. Then you can alternate those with a very intentional sort of mark and line, and then using the colour shaper here, I can keep that intentional mark, but I can blur it and fudge it a little bit with the colour shaper. So you can get a lovely softness with just sort of layering up these transparent layers. And layering light over dark and dark over light. Okay, so here I'm going to put the paint on thickly. Look at the angle of the colour shaper, it's flat, and the paint's gone on quite thickly. Now I can use the edge like a blade and get a really sharp, hard edge and pull the paint across. Okay, so I'm changing the sort of mark I've got now by using a scratchy brush and now a comb just to get some different sort of marks. And now I'm using a real weird sort of homemade brush made with string, and I've dipped that in the paint and I'm just sort of splattering that around, making some sort of scratchy, just a variety of mark really, just giving me a difference. And this is what I'm really into at the moment actually in my painting, is just building up a surface with really a lot of different unintentional, accidental, let's just see what happens type of mark. Putting a bit of water on and then just scraping back just to bring that transparency through. Okay, now I'm adding a little bit of soft gel medium and spreading that around and then letting that dry. And that's sort of sealing parts of it so that when I put paint over the top, that will act like a little bit of glass in a way. The paint will slide very smoothly over it and not so smoothly over the parts where I don't have that gel medium, and that will give me a different sort of effect altogether. So I'm putting this dark brown on. See how the edge of this colour shaper can make a really hard, sharp edge as you cut through thick paint. Where I've got the gel medium, the paint is just sliding off, and where it isn't, it's sitting there in a transparent layer. You can use the sharp edge of the colour shaper to create those nice lines. And I like to also, of course, use a brush to just load the paint on thickly like that. And then to move the paint around in a transparent layer as well, so that I don't only use a colour shaper, I can use a brush as well to get different marks. But having put thick paint on, it's really nice to spread that thick paint around with the flat colour shaper and get these lovely sort of accidental sort of pools of thick paint, which are really lovely, sitting next to those transparent layers. Now you can create really good lines and sort of edges with them. This is something I like to do, loading the edge of it with paint and then just making those sorts of marks to create lines. Now this is something else I like to do, just to make some sort of scribbly mark with dark paint on light, dark on light, and then with a bit of water get the colour shaper and just move the paint off, and you get some really lovely effects. Here's another one, and see how it almost sort of, that little wormy line is sort of almost transparent. It's like a drawing in a way, because you keep the edge in the middle gets taken away. Okay, now I'm just using the colour shaper to create edges, to build up layers, and the colours I'm choosing, I'm keeping them all kind of the same value. So I'm just creating a nice surface, and when I've built some sort of depth into that surface, I'll then take thick paint and sort of create edges and build up some sort of design. Here I am bringing in a bit of pencil just to add another sort of mark. And now I'm going to start creating these edges with the thick paint. So having built up a really lovely surface of sort of varying colours and marks and things, now I can try and make a little bit of sense of it, bring some structure into the painting, define some edges with thick paint. So look how I'm holding that colour shaper there. It's really, I'm holding it very lightly. Creating those nice edges, soft edges and hard edges, and then bringing in a line which is quite different from what I've already got. And you can see in this detail here all the different sort of marks that are built up on the surface of this painting. And it's just really allowing the paint and allowing the media some freedom to be and do what it wants, with just a little bit of a push from the tool you're using. And that was fun.